I believe the best work we do really doesn't even feel like work. It's more so an expression of who we are as a person. And the challenges and experiences we go through act as the guiding force behind that work. And obviously, we're always trying to refine our craft and progress and have that growth mindset. But I've learned over the years that being in that growth mindset, you can take it for granted and it's a privilege, it's not a right.
Hmm.
And you grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and Dorchester. At a young age, what was it like being in an environment where you were focused on trying to survive and not thrive?
Um, well, since that's all I knew, um, it was just a habit of just having to work hard. Just even to be considered in a conversation, you got to work 10 times harder than the other person. So it's a habit, and I think a lot of it has to do with when you work up when you grow up. I would say work up, which is kind of a Freudian slip, but that's the way it is. You work. You start working earlier. Like for me, I was shining shoes downtown and then working in the car wash and different places wherever I could, and even before that, I used to clean people's yards and whatnot, and they used to pay me off with the recyclables, what we call recyclables, the 2 cent bottles and whatnot. They would add up, so you kind of do that. So it was just something that it was the environment, it was the culture. So when the culture is that, when you grow up in a three-decker neighborhood, 3 floors and whatnot, everybody is working hard. Everybody blue collar, and everybody is trying to hustle. So it was just natural. And of course, I don't think I saw it as work back then. I saw it as a means to an end, especially because all I did with when I'm thinking about when I was really young and I was running errands and doing things for people, we used to go out and then buy stuff that we wanted, whether it was candy or, like a model airplane. I used to like to work on model airplanes, but then you had the kind of airplanes you put together and they could fly and buying little gadgets, little toys, stuff like that.
When you were a kid, did you have a vision for what you wanted that end to look like?
Depends. When I was really younger, I think it was more about the role models. The movie stars, the athletes, the entertainers. I didn't really. Now that I think about it, I didn't think much about people actual people. It was more about the people I saw on TV. I probably had that fantasy or that notion that if you were on TV, you were really important. And you were really famous. And I think everybody wanted that. But I didn't have a lot of dreams until I got to maybe when I got into elementary school. I knew I wanted to go to college. I know I knew I wanted to be able to make a good living.
As a kid, you were very quiet, and it wasn't necessarily because that's what felt most natural, but it was more so from the standpoint of just trying to stay out of harm's way. And you say, whatever emotional pain I experienced, I unconsciously buried in my body. No wonder pain became my constant companion. And we all try to experience pain in different ways where we can open ourselves up to that pain or we try to close ourselves off from that pain. How did drugs and alcohol play into that relationship with your pain?
Well, I think the pain. I think for me, and I know now there are a lot of our memories are stored in the body, and that would not. But when I started playing sports, I was very injury prone. Now I know that because I was in a stressful environment, and even if the environment wasn't stressful, the way I was relating to my experience was stressful. Um, I was injury prone, and so when I started getting injured, and in those days, they didn't really have sports medicine. the way they have it now. And so I recognized that when I took those meds, that it got rid of my inhibitions, and I was able to get out of myself. And but I think one of the main reasons I was quiet, just to go back a little bit, was because I was super sensitive, and so I was too sensitive, and I would talk about my feelings, and they would tell me that, don't be sensitive and man up. And so that was another occasion for me not to share what I was really feeling, because I was, I guess, I guess I would call it now, and I was an empath. I could pick up people's emotions and their pain. And so when I used to see, in those days, we used to call them winos, but they were really homeless people. When I used to see one on the street, I would feel sad. And if somebody in the neighborhood moved, I would be devastated. So you can see how that would follow over in terms of team sports. Or if my team lost, I would feel really bad. Or if I lost competition, uh, I would be disappointed. But it's interesting. I didn't really take it that seriously. When I lost, it was more like when my team lost, or someone else lost. But yeah, so it kind of opened up a whole new world for me in terms of being able to be more. Um, I wouldn't say loquacious, but to speak more than I would normally speak.
How old were you when you became consciously aware that using drugs and alcohol shifted from kind of just dealing with the pain and injuries you were going through to abusing those things?
Now, I think it was probably adolescence, probably, in the teens, 13, 14, 15, around that age. Yeah.
And then when you got older and into college, into professional life, what would a typical day look like for you at your worst when you were also dealing
Yeah.
with
Well,
drugs and alcohol?
yeah. Well, it was like I was very disciplined. I would go to my classes, and, pretty much, for the, Monday through Thursday, you went to class and you did everything you're supposed to do, and then Thursday night, and then the weekends you partied, or you got involved in that stuff. But it depends on the season, because when I played basketball, when I played sports, I was disciplined enough not to get engaged in that kind of stuff during the season. So I like to talk about I'd be Joe College in the day, but then at night I'd be a little bit more. If I wasn't in season, I'd be a little bit more active. I didn't really watch what I took, or who I hung with, or what I did. So I think it's hard to say typical kid, but whatever everybody else was doing, that's what I did.
What did the acceptance process and then the rehab process look like for you? Because obviously, before going through that recovery process, you have to be consciously aware that you have a problem and you want to get better. What did that process look like for you?
Yeah, so that it's interesting because it was I just celebrated 40 years of sobriety on July 30th. So what it looked like for me is, so I didn't really think I was going to be able to, you know, not be dependent on alcohol and drugs until a friend of mine came by my house on April 1st, and now that I think about it, prior to that, I had I had contracted a strep infection, and so I actually was walking around with like 104-degree temperature. Then I went in the hospital, and I was in the hospital for a week. And then when I got out of the hospital, shortly after that, my friend came by and took me to an AA meeting. It was a Sunday. It was April 1st, April Fool's Day. And when I went to that meeting, when I saw him, I said, "Oh, okay. So how did he do that?" So I was very curious. And so I started going to 12-step meetings after that. And then I got into a detox, and I went into a 21-day detox. But I had connected with a therapist and this HMO that I was in. And so, uh, we designed a plan for me to go in and do a 21-day detox. And so when I went into the detox, it was pretty much like I had been still going to like 12-step meetings. But when I went into the detox, there was a part of me that knew, I guess, because I was it was, you're known by the company you keep. I was hanging around people in recovery. There was a voice that said to me, well, if the same George that goes in is the same one that comes out, we got a problem. Like, Houston, we have a problem. Uh, so, so I went into detox and I, kicked cold turkey. And then when I got out, I decided, I went to meetings. I went to 30 meetings in 30 days, 60 meetings in 60 days, 90 meetings in 90 days. Then I got involved in this self-help group, but I went to a lot of meetings and I was very active in the program. So once again, it's that hard work. It's that work ethic is, I don't do anything lightly. Everything's intense. Everything is like, if I'm in, I'm either all in or I'm not in. And so for me, it was, and then that's when I discovered, how I really felt, and I learned about recovery and personal development, personal responsibility, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I would say yes, I was all in. The other part of that, you talk about outwork. So when I got out of the detox, I got involved in this uh, experiential program at the HMO I was in, called Managing Stress, and that's when I learned about changing my lifestyle and the idea of learning about the mind body modalities like meditation and yoga and tai chi, and just actually be taking more responsibility for my health care, and not just relying on some doctor or some professional health person telling me what to do. I would listen, but I was actively involved in my recovery in my life. So that was a lifestyle change. That was huge. It was big. And so when I went into this program, they taught us about the mind body process. So we had a syllabus. They gave us a tape, and we would listen to the tape and learn about the meditation, or just the idea of getting some type of auto feedback, some way of just understanding what we do and the impact, and just understanding that the mind and body are connected. But also, I learned about this idea of the difference between reacting and responding. So when you react, you just react, and then not only in reaction, you're awfulizing, you focus on what's wrong, and you keep going. And I started to learn about the idea if you can create space between stimulus and response, and then in that space you can choose your response. So I learned, I think it was trying to think what it was called, the three C's. You know, that I was committed to my development, and I saw everything as a challenge. And the third thing was that I had control. So I couldn't control what happens to me, but I can control whether I reacted or responded. So we call that resilience. And that was really huge for me to understand that, I'm responsible, and I get to choose how I think, how I feel, how I behave. Even though if I don't exercise that autonomy, then it's happening. And so just knowing that I can control that. I can't control what happens to me, but I control my response to it, my attitude towards it, and the amount of effort I'm going to bring to it. So when I got into that process, it gave us a syllabus with things to read and study. And so at that point, I think I started reading a book a week at least. So over 40 years, that's a lot of books. And not just reading books, but just being a learner, because I felt I had this need to be intellectually stimulated. I think we all have that need. We want to understand. I wanted to understand. Okay, it took me a long time to decide to take responsibility, to admit that my life was unmanageable. Uh, but there's a lot of people out there that don't do that. What motivated, so I was interested in what motivates people to do the right thing, especially when they've been doing the wrong thing for so long. And the other thing is understanding how to communicate with people. And especially if you're working or talking to people, how do you know, or what do you do when what they say and what they do don't line up, which is what most people that I was engaging with at that time. And I think in general, most people don't really, they don't have the integrity of doing what they say they do. And some things you can do that. But when it comes to things like addiction, like like dealing with unpleasant feelings and situations, we tend to there's a tendency not to be truthful, or a tendency to just not to follow up on things because it's assumed to be more painful than it's worth, or for that reason. But just start to be able to look at myself and to take responsibility and to realize that it was really important for me to walk my talk.
The mind body connection and the relationship between the mind body is very fascinating to me. And it's something that I resonate with on a deep level. Just to give you a little bit more background on me, a few years ago, I had a really bad back injury. I had two herniated discs in my lower back and had terrible chronic back pain for 7 months, 24/7 pain. No type of physical treatments helped, like physical therapy, massage, cortisone shots. It's not until I found the work of Dr. John Sarno. Not sure if you've ever heard of him before or not, but his work with this thing called tension myoneural syndrome is how it's all about the mind body connection and how
Mm-hmm.
physical pain, there's a large psychological component to it
Mm-hmm.
where things can be happening in our mind, and the result of that is a physical manifestation like physical pain. And I know that you've dealt with chronic back pain before and also
Mm-hmm.
bad migraines in your life.
Mm-hmm.
When you became more aware of that mind body connection, how did that raise your level of consciousness with everything that you do in your life?
Yes. So thanks for reminding me. The first thing I discovered when I stopped using um, substances the way I was, including drinking, is I had chronic pain. And I've been going to a chiropractor since 1975. So I didn't get cleaned in 1984. So I've always had back pain. I slept on a bed, I had a board underneath my mattress in college because, I always had back pain and migraine and headaches. And so I had to learn how to deal with them, and see the pain as a motivator, to understand how do I relate to the pain in ways where I didn't have to take, drugs. And sometimes I have to and I had to, but for the most part, I was able to relate to the pain because what I would discover when I started looking into it and with the self awareness and being able to observe my experience throughout the day, I realized that there were moments where there was less pain and that there were things that I could do, like my glutes, certain muscles and certain stretches that I had to do and do things and do strengthening things, but just realizing that I could relate to the pain in a way that would allow me to thrive and not just survive. And that I realized that I wasn't in pain all day, even though that was now we're talking about chronic pain in our perception of what's happening to us. And so I had to learn right away that the nervous system doesn't discriminate, but it's programmed to move towards what's pleasant, move away from or have avoidance or aversion to what's unpleasant. And if it's neither pleasant or unpleasant, and I'm not talking about equanimity, I'm talking about indifference, where there's nothing we're interested in, we space out. And so the body's going to do that. So to train myself with something that's painful, not to push it away or move away from it, but to be present for it, to embrace it. And if something is really pleasant, to embrace it without being attached to it and identify with it to the point where it's consuming me, but to be able to say, and Dr. David Hawkins, he wrote a lot of books. One of his books was, it happens to be Power versus Force. He said that all experiences are of equal value. And so the idea is, can we, and I have my At Home with George, I started off every week by creating the possibility of saying yes to whatever comes up, to embrace it, say yes to it, and then generate the hope, and then create the space and relate to it in a way with the growth mindset. What's the lesson here? How do I learn? And what's this teaching me? And so that's been really powerful. And I've been doing that all along. But as you continue to experiment with life, investigate, continuous inquiry is what I call it sometimes, you start to think about how to do that. and how, what that worked, how do I make it? How do I do it more? That didn't work. How do I not do that and do more of the other? So the chronic pain thing is what really got me into that program to really deal with the migraines and the back pain. And I could see with the migraine, sometimes it was most of the time when one of those things were being impacted me is because there was a lot of stress or I was trying to do too much. You talked about outworking. It's great to work hard, but you got to work smart, and you can't want it too much. We talk about right effort. It has to be balanced. It can't be too much. So if you have too much efforting and not enough poise or concentration, then you become frenetic. But if you have too much poise and concentration and not enough effort, you become sluggish. And so in my book, The Mindful Athlete Secrets to Pure Performance, I talk about right effort, right concentration or poise or being able to focus. And so learning how to do that. And so for me, it took me decades to figure that out because everything I did was like the warrior energy. And then I realized less is more. Slow motion gets you there quicker. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So that was a really challenging lesson for me to learn because the intensity and this ability to, just work your way through it. Sometimes less is more. And that's where the wisdom or the discrimination comes in, discernment comes in, is understanding that sometimes you got to bring more energy and sometimes you got to dial it back. And so that's a self-regulatory skill. I talk about self-regulation. It's what I teach a lot. It's self-regulation, self-awareness. So self-awareness is just mirror mind. You got to see things clearly. You got to embrace it and say yes to it. But then the self-regulation is this idea that we have this ability to step back and observe experience, and that we can observe our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors, as well as how we interpret experience. And the idea is to understand that and then be able to, we have autonomy, but we have to take responsibility and make choices and train ourselves to focus on the right choices and to focus on working with the right level of intensity. Sometimes you have to bring more energy, sometimes you have to bring it down. But without the self awareness, you can't self regulate. And when you can self regulate, then you can get to self mastery.
Yeah, a word that you use a lot in your writing I've found is you use the word incremental, where you're just trying to make those small gains
Yes.
on a
Yes.
daily basis.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you that there is such a thing as going too hard. And you talk about outworking, and that's something that I think I struggled with, or I would think about, is how do I use this outworker philosophy, but in a healthy and smart way? And then something clicked with me where I think there's a big difference between outworking and overworking, where when you outwork, you understand that it's a dance in a way where you know
Mhm.
when you have to pull back. But with overworking, it's almost like you're just like full steam ahead, and that can be a problem at some points. And when it gets back to the conversation on pain with chronic pain, one of the main things that I learned was, and you said this as well, but just being able to be aware of what you're feeling and
Mhm.
not reacting to it,
Right.
not understanding that this is something that I'm feeling in the moment, but like this isn't a part of who I am as a person. And it gets into this understanding also of rewiring your brain.
Yep.
And you say many individuals want to change, but they're often unconsciously attached to their suffering or to the old self they think they want to change. They have identified with that suffering or that old self for so long that they're afraid they won't know who they are without it, even if that suffering or that old self has no real place in the context of their current life anymore. And we can overcome suffering, we can find purpose in suffering. I think we can find accomplishments within suffering. I definitely think I did with, all the pain that I went through, literally the physical pain. I think there was a lot of good that came from that.
Yep.
But I think the most important thing, the question that I have for you is, how do you think you've released yourself from your suffering?
You mean on a good day?
Sure. Yeah.
It's not always.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always the same. It's always the same drill. Is you know it's the difference between trying to force or allowing. And a big part of it is just seeing what's working and what's not working. And so a lot of the process has to do with understanding what's helpful and what's not helpful. And so it's not just what you're doing, it's the context in which you're doing it. And your body will tell you if you're trying too hard, there'll be tension. And if you're not trying hard enough, you'll be more like this. So you have to find, once again, the right effort. You have to find the balance. But it's really it's the motivation. See, if we're coming from fear, doubt, and insecurity, there's always going to be this. You're doing it, but it's fear based, and that's always leads to more suffering. But if it's having the courage or having fear and developing the courage to do it anyway, but it's not just doing something. It's being guided by insight or wisdom or information. So we got to know, what's the intention? What is it we're trying to do? And what's the best way to do it? And and then are we clear about what we're trying to do? Do we have a clear goal that's relevant and important to us? And then with the goal and then the immediate feedback, are we willing to see what's there and then make the adjustments on the fly? And that takes a lot, because a lot of times it's hard to see. It's challenging to see things. It's painful to see things. But it's only by getting to a place of vulnerability where we're willing to say, okay, whatever's happening is happening because the conditions for what is happening to be happening are present. And so once we admit to that, and then we understand what are the conditions, and if we know what the conditions are, we can change them. You understand? But there has to be an embrace of them first. And I'll give you an example. When you start doing this, the spiritual stuff, and you realize that anger is just not helpful. And like I said about the nervous system, so what I would do sometimes is the antidote to anger would be like loving kindness, make the person be happy, or one of the antidotes. Or you just notice it and notice that and if you stay there, it's going to lead to unpleasant circumstances. So you just have to figure out how to feel it and let it process through, which is really challenging. But even with that, sometimes just watching it and not doing anything, or marshaling the anger to actually do something about it, to actually use it for the force of good, because we need energy to do things. And so because I was teaching this stuff, and I had anger. I went from anger, which I would say is the awareness, to the action of the compassionate action, which would be to do the opposite of anger, or, to just kind of look at it, feel it, and let it process through. Well, what I would do is, in order to get rid of the anger, I would do the loving kindness, or I would get involved in something, but something was missing. And then I figured it out. What I figured out was I never accepted it. Because that's why when we look at things as good and bad, the ego is going to kind of deny things, not see it, because it means that we're bad if we have anger. We shouldn't have anger. But if we can see it as this wholesome and not wholesome, don't judge it. Then we say, oh, there's anger present. Once I embrace it and accept it, which is really challenging, because you may have to go through the stages of grief. Bargaining, oh God, if you just get me through this, I'll never take another drink, right? Or whatever. Or I'll never do something, or I'll do something to make up for the denial. Or, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. It'll go away. The anger, get angry about the depression, the anger turn in, and then getting to acceptance. And so it's not linear. You go through it, and it has its own process. And so we have a lot of deaths, because we got to die to the old self to be born of the new self. So every ending is a beginning. Every beginning is an ending. And so once I said, okay, so there's anger there, or even more so for me, it wasn't so much the anger, it was the stress, feeling stressed. And I would say, oh, I don't get stressed. I grew up tough. I can handle stuff. I don't get stressed. And then if I listen to my body would be saying, that's some BS, George. There's stress in here. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, your shoulders up around your 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 ears. There's some stress in there. So once I was able to open up, be vulnerable, and say, let me look. Okay, won't I act as if there's stress there? Okay, there's stress there. Then once I accept it, now I can do something about it. Just like with my addiction. It's a lot of denial. It's like, yeah, there's stuff going on, but it's okay and whatever. But once I say, yes, I have a problem, my life is unmanageable, and my best thinking keeps me high or drunk. So I have to accept it. Once I accept it, then I can do the compassionate action. And in that case, the compassionate action is to realize, yes, I go through all that grief. I have to admit that I have a problem. Once I admit it, I can be vulnerable. But out of the vulnerability becomes a power because now I had to say, okay, and I'm talking about my addiction now. My best thinking kept me high or drunk. So now, once I accepted that I was unmanageable, then I was open to do things. I had the growth mindset, to do things that would work. And what I had to do is behave my way into proper thinking because my thinking was all jilted and in the fear mode instead of being in the growth mode, saying, okay, what's the lesson here? Let's look at it. And then once I was able to look at it and try new things, and they said, okay, do this. But here's how simple it was. Not easy, but simple. If you don't drink, you won't get drunk. If you don't take drugs, you won't get high. You know, that's it. If you don't awfulize, your attitude will be better. Instead of focusing on what's wrong all the time, focus on what's right. Have attitude, gratitude, whatever it took. So you can see with the 4 A's, the awareness of it, the acceptance of it, which is really the challenging work, and then the compassionate action, and then the fourth A is the assessment: what worked, what didn't work, and how do you get it to work more. But what I had to do is behave my way into proper thinking. Because once I did that, then now I could think about it and understand it. But some of us, because we're in our heads, we think we have to understand it before we do it or before we commit to do it. Now it takes vulnerability to do it when you don't even know if it's going to work. But I would say that's life. That's what we do, trial and error. And to the degree that we can accept that and work with it, then we're into something. We get in that growth mode, and then you actually get into you get into this idea of learning and achieving. And when you do that, you actually generate what I would call energizing enthusiasm. So enthusiasm comes from these the God within, and theos, just doing that. So believe it or not, outworking people, outworking ourselves, but outworking each other in a way that we get more wisdom, we have more compassion, we have more love, but we do it. But like I said, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. But because when you're in fear, you're trying to do it fast because you want to know, how am I doing? Am I working? Instead of saying, no, it'll work, I got to commit to it. Just do the work, and then I'll figure it out later. But do what I know to do, and then the rest will be given to me. But that's totally antithetical to our culture and the way that most of us are raised. And so you can outwork, but a lot of the work is really on an energetic level.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think one of the main things that helped me unlock myself internally was understanding that the feelings that I feel, that's not who I am. That's just something that I'm feeling in the moment, and having
Mm-hmm.
that higher level of awareness that I am not those things, or the insecurities that I might have. Those are things that I'm just experiencing, but that is not who I am as a person. And that helped me evolve as a person and reach that higher level of consciousness. And that stemmed from the work that I had to do with my back pain and further
Mm-hmm.
understanding the mind body connection. So that was really the pivotal point in my life where I felt like there was a pretty big switch, or a pretty big evolution in who I was as a person. And you were living a double life from the standpoint that you were a financial analyst by day, and then you were an addict by night. But once you got clean and started becoming more in touch with yourself internally, you still felt like you were living a double life, from the standpoint that the professional life that you had built for yourself really didn't fit into this evolved version of George that you had become. So you originally went through a rehab process so you could get clean from
Hmm.
drugs and alcohol. But taking this a step forward now, what did this personal realignment process look like for you?
Yes. So now we talk about being honest, and just being real with how you feel. So what it looks like is just being able to listen to yourself and ask yourself, why am I here? What am I doing? So I was working as a financial analyst. I was really good at it, but my heart wasn't in it. And so when I would forget meetings or I'd do things, and I still was in. Once I talked about the denial, I was in denial about it. And so in those days, I would meet with my teacher, my meditation teacher, once a week. And one day I went in. I talk about this in both my books, I believe. I went in to see for it was a Monday afternoon, and I walk in to the meeting and to the room, and he says, "What's going on?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You look happy today." I said, "Oh, I took a mental health day off from work." And he said, "You should make a habit of that." That's all he said. That was it. And of course, at where I was, the crap hit the fan, which it usually does, what I call ass on fire motivation. Uh, uh, when I got to the point where I couldn't stay and I couldn't leave, that was another bottom, just like alcohol. I couldn't stay, couldn't leave. And I spent the whole weekend just breathing in, breathing out, and just feeling devastated. Because sometimes with me, when you make a strong choice, it's not like black and white. There's gray areas and there's pros and cons. But to suffer through it, and I read somewhere, it's everybody wants to be free, but the reality is the struggle for freedom. You gotta be up for that. It's you're struggling, even if you're not being free, you're struggling to be free. And so for me, I got to the point where I couldn't stay, and so I left. That was one of the best decisions I made, but it was extremely painful. And so yeah, so that's what happened to me. And then to actually start over again. But there's no coincidence that at the same time that I was going through this process, The Power of Myth was being played on PBS. I had just moved into this apartment, and not far from where I live now, but I moved into the apartment, and I was, watching PBS, and at night during this time, they had the 6-part series, and I was watching it, and Joseph Campbell was talking about follow your bliss, and he says, if you follow your bliss, you'll get the bliss. And so that's what I did. I didn't know what it was, but I left my job with no job in sight. And for 2 years, I just explored who I wanted to be when I grew up. And that's the same thing. Sometimes we have this idea that, okay, so at that time, in 1989, I was 38 years old. And so it's midlife crisis, whatever. It's like, uh, what do you mean you're trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up? Well, because we're going to have multiple jobs and experiences because we change, everything else changes, and so we got to change with it. Got to be like water. And so I gave myself the opportunity to reset, the opportunity to just look at, okay, if I only had 6 months to live, what would I be doing? Or whatever. Now I can do what I really wanted to do, because that was the whole thing. When I got clean, one of the things I realized was, oh, I have this need to be intellectually stimulated. Now I see it as pursuing excellence and wisdom with grace and ease. But back in the day, I would do study. I'd read something once, and if I didn't get it, too bad. And then I gave myself permission. You can read it as many times as you want till you understand it. That's the important thing. Don't be in a hurry. Just you want to understand it. Once again, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so I did that, and it kept evolving, and keep because there's a my experience is, and I've been in recovery for 40 years. There's a gentleman. His name was Warren Bennis, and he wrote a book called On Becoming a Leader. And he said, to be a leader, you got to be yourself. So now we're talking about authenticity of being who you are. And that was my thing. I'm be who I am. I was a financial analyst because my high school basketball coach told me that accountants make good money. That's where it came from. It wasn't something that was heartfelt that said, I want to do that. I was really good at it, but it's not what I wanted to do. So I had to start. So when I opened up, I started listening to myself. That still small voice is easily drowned out. There's a lot of wisdom that comes out of here. And I said, no, let's, understand it. I really, and so I read books and I became a seeker. But learning is the thing. You got to be a learner. That's a competitive edge or seeking wisdom, however you want to call it. But yeah, that for me, that's what it came down to, is just really understanding that and giving myself the opportunity. So anyway, Warren Bennis said, uh, self-knowledge and self-invention are lifelong processes. So what does that mean? That means that for your whole life, you're going to have to keep, because everything changes. Even how you see yourself is changing. You're going to get old. You're going to die. You're going to get sick. The things you like might be taken from you, or you might be confronted with things you don't like. That's just the way it is. But it's your attitude, is how you relate to it. It's going to determine whether you're free or you're struggling to be free. And both of those are fine versus feeling like you have that you're a victim of circumstance, like Curly used to say on Three Stooges. No, that you can choose your response no matter what. You get to choose the attitude you want to relate to. And this is what Viktor Frankl talks about, the ultimate freedom. The essential freedom is choosing to have an attitude. Okay, so I'm dying, or yeah, I'm in this situation, but I can come. I don't have to lose my dignity. I don't have to lose who I want to be, how I want to go out.
Do you think you had to hit rock bottom in your life to have the inclination to become more aligned with who you truly were as a person?
Yes, that's why I call it the AOF method of motivation. Ass on fire. There has to be a sense of urgency. Now, when I first started doing this, yeah, I have my butt literally on fire. And even I know people who have their butt on fire, but they deny it. That once again, if you don't accept it, you're going to deny it or ignore it. But I think it's really more about, you have to have the want to. You have to want something different. You have to want something and realize what's happening that's in the way is actually the way. Is dealing with that. But a sense of urgency is important. You have to have the want to. And I was reading somewhere where this gentleman was talking about, what was his name? He's a running back for Chicago, Walter Payton. And he said Walter Payton wasn't the biggest or the fastest or whatever, but he wanted it more than anybody else. So he used to do hill training, and he ended up with liver cancer. And I'm not sure if that didn't happen because he outworked. He worked too much. But the thing was, no one was going to outwork him. And Larry Bird would say it. I grew up in Boston. I hear him say, well, I got to work hard because I know that dude on the West Coast, Magic, is working hard. So I got to work hard.
So you became one of three residents at Cambridge Insight Meditation Center, and then you got your master's in counseling psychology from Cambridge College. So that's really where you made a big shift in your life after being a financial analyst. When you started teaching, how did that continue to help you with truly understanding who you were as a person, but also now helping other people?
Yeah. So one of the things I learned from 12-step recovery was this idea of, if you want to keep something, you got to give it away. So in terms of my sobriety, in terms of my breakthroughs on the performance level, in order for me to keep it, I have to give it away. So I have to teach. And if you want to really learn something, you teach it. So those two things have always been drivers for me. The continuous process improvement, which the Japanese would call Kaizen. You're just, each day, and the success definition I like to use is the one from Earl Nightingale's book, the Strangest Secret. Do you know what the Strangest Secret is?
I have not, but I know who Earl Nightingale is.
Okay. You become what you think about. So he says success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So you don't have to wait until you get totally to the mountaintop, but each step is a success. And so I learned in recovery. The other thing is, is one of my Georgisms. You got to forget yourself to find yourself. So oftentimes we feel like we're doing, we're in a funk, whatever. But if we get out of ourselves, and this is what M. Scott Peck talks about, love is going, extending yourself or extending yourself to other to help someone else's growth or spiritual development, including your own. So forget myself to find myself and be of service, to serve others. And by serving others, I'm serving myself because I and the other are one. So there's this idea that 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 how do I want to say this? This idea that all that I give is given to me. So whatever I give to you, I'm going to get back. If I give you grief, that's what I'm creating. That's what I'm going to get back. If I give you love, that's what I'm going to give back. And so this idea of being, forget yourself to find yourself, but then it's the paradox. That's paradoxical. But the other part of it is you got to be selfish to be selfless. And of course, we know that from when you get on the airplane and they tell you to put your oxygen on first, or you won't be around and put it on to help the other person. And so these are some things they seem paradoxical, but if you look at them and you experience them, you see that that's true. Because when you're working on yourself, you also work helping others. Because what you give, you can only give what you have. So if you have it, you give it to you and give it out, and you give it, and it comes back to you. And when you focus on another person, it takes you out of your stuff, but it helps them. By helping them, it helps you. Does that make sense? So I talk about this illusion of separateness, not this idea of no self. Yeah, it's the illusion of separateness. We have these barriers up, but in reality, I and the other are one, connected.
So you obviously became a very evolved person when you started teaching other people, and it wasn't so much just doing for the work for yourself, but it was now sharing your knowledge through your experiences with other people. And getting back to what I said at the start of our conversation, where I feel like our best work really doesn't even feel like work. It's more so just an expression of who we are as a person and the experiences that we've gone through in life. And the next thing I'd love to talk with you about is you were roommates with Julius Erving at UMass, and then you started working with the Bulls later in your career. How do you think your relationship with him prepared you for your work with the Chicago Bulls?
Believe it or not, I believe all our experiences, everything we've thought of, we've done, we've engaged in, has an impact on what we do going forward, depending on how we deal with it. But it helped me in a big way because when I roomed with him, when we were friends and we roomed with him, but I was with him when he was doing things. Say for instance, when he made the jump from college to the ABA, I was there. When he played his first, when he actually even before we were really good friends, I was there at his first varsity game, basketball game, because in those days when you were a freshman, you played freshman ball. You couldn't play for all 4 years like you can now. So I saw his first varsity game. I seen his first semi-pro game. We were still in college, and we used to drive to Portchester, New York, and he played. And I seen his coming out party because he went from playing in the college level where you couldn't dunk the ball in the game to going out, and then all of a sudden he had all of that stuff, and all of a sudden he was free. It was like he was unlocked, and all of a sudden he was like all the stuff he was pent up that was pent up was so. And at the same time, when we were in college, like even before I got there, they would line up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a 7:30 game when he was a freshman, and so when he was in varsity, it was like that. So he was a celebrity. Anyway, he went. He had a lot of charisma. People would come around him. So he was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. So and I used to go and hang out with him in Virginia and stuff like that. So I was around. So I was around the pro game. I understood. I grew up in the hood, and I was an aspiring basketball player. Although I got injured and then my career was over, but and I was involved with even when we would entertain recruits. I would be involved in hosting them and stuff like that, even though I wasn't on the team, but because he was my roommate. And then when he went pro, then I had Al Skinner, who also went pro, and he was still, on the team, and so I was engaged in it. So I understood it. Understood the game, and so when I went and worked with the Bulls, I had street cred because at that they knew Dr. J was a Hall of Famer, the ambassador, just an amazing person. Believe it or not, as great as he is as a basketball player, he's a better person. And so that set me up. But it was also, even though I had all that, I think it was my desire to not only my desire to succeed. I didn't think about failing because I saw it as because it's my calling. This is why I was born to do this. And I went through all my adversity for this ability to be able to help people. And so for me, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I wanted to serve. I wanted to be of help. And at that time, I was still working at the UMass Medical Center. And at that time, it was called the Stress Reduction and Relaxation Program. And it was in what we call the Department of Preventive Behavioral Medicine. So this was all cutting edge stuff. In other words, just focusing on prevention and maintenance versus, acute treatment where somebody has a issue and you're trying to deal with it. We're saying, okay, yeah, we could deal with it, but let's develop more wellness. Let's prevent it from happening in the first place and focus on prevention. So it made perfect sense for me to go in and work with them because of my background, but also because of how I was trained and my desire to serve. I think we underestimate that, but I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had this curiosity and this willingness to be vulnerable to go in and figure it out. But I knew in myself that if I could overcome substance abuse, there's nothing I can't do. I just have to realize that, I'm bad mofo. I got a masterpiece within. You want to call it Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, divine spark, whatever it is. But I had the growth mindset before I knew what that was, because it was like, I got over that. Okay, how do you do it? Let's go in and see what's happening. Trial and error. But go in with this idea that it's going to work out and it's going to be great.
You started working with the Chicago Bulls in 1993. And one of the things that I think I love most about how you started working with them is that it was just a very natural, organic process. It's not like you were looking for that role or that position. It was more so Phil Jackson going to John Kabat-Zinn asking for somebody like you to bring into the organization. How important was Phil Jackson to your success with the team?
Without him, it wouldn't work because he was doing stuff no one else was doing and he was open. And it's not something you do. You don't trust your team to a stranger. You don't trust your team. You don't let people in the team process like that. And as a matter of fact, I remember because I have a mutual friend and because I had met Kobe before I started working with the Lakers because my friend Roland Lazenby was saying, hey, man, there's this young kid you got to come see. So I went on the road with Roland and he introduced me. And then when Roland was telling him that I work with the Bulls and I was in the process and he said, you mean Phil let him into practice like that? And Phil, it was like incredulous. Kobe couldn't believe that was something. So you have to have, as Stephen Covey says, all breakthroughs are break with. You got to have somebody, and Phil being a maverick and Phil doing things that other people weren't doing. But the thing that was really important about our relationship was the fact that he saw his players as if they were his congregation, that he cared about the whole person and he cared about their well-being on and off the court. And so we were in alignment. So that's why it worked. And so we decided we see what happened because I was really brought in to help them deal with the stress of success because they had just won 3 NBA championships in a row. And then the crap hit the fan, and then we were in full blown crisis. And then the rest is history. But it really comes down to what I said. 4 A's: awareness, acceptance, compassionate action, and assessment. And sometimes the compassionate action is not knowing what you're doing, but you do what you know to do, and the next step will be given to you, and then you go from there. But we have an idea of what we want, but how it's going to manifest, and that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of faith. And I like to say, you don't get to the Hall of Fame, HOF, without what I call the Hall of Fame: hope, optimism, faith. So everybody that goes to the Hall of Fame, they got to have those, or you won't get there. Just like you won't get to Carnegie Hall if you don't practice.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I love Phil Jackson so much, and you talk about this in your book as well, is how there's this focus on wellness over winning,
Yes,
where you say if you're not focusing on the player, you're focusing on the full person.
yes,
And if you focus on wellness and if you focus on the full person, then winning just becomes a byproduct of that.
yes.
When you're just focused on winning, you're blocking yourself off from so much more growth outside of sports.
Yes, because now you're in survival mode. You're in fight, flight, or freeze, or you're on your heels instead of being on your toes. You're more closed down, or more high, like tunnel vision rather than being more open. They call it the broaden and build theory. Actually, when your mind is at positive, it enhances your cognitive functioning. So you're thinking, how you feel, how you relate to yourself, how you deal with setbacks and everything is enhanced. It's actually an advantage to have that broaden and build, be in the growth mindset. You're asking, what's the lesson? And then once again, when I talked about challenge, committed to growth, seeing something as a challenge, that's what I did with the team. It's like, okay, this is a challenge here. There's a crisis, but there's two meanings. There's danger, but there's a challenge here. And this is the thing that people have to understand. Anxiety comes with the freedom. Anxiety comes with the potential. So one side of the coin is freedom or potential. The other side is anxiety, uncertainty. They come together. So when you play at a high level, when you perform at a high level, anxiety is your companion, but it's how you relate to it that makes a difference between being stuck or being hindered from seeing clearly or being in a moment or being able to use it as fuel to step up.
On your work with the Bulls, you said I had to have a pure relationship with the players and with the work itself, where I wasn't trying to use them and what went on between us to promote myself. Do you think it's a necessity for sports psychologists or people like yourself who work with high level athletes to stay unknown or kind of act as their own independent entity within the organization?
What do you mean?
Almost like, obviously, with coaches, you're on the front lines and you're also playing into the entertainment and the business side of things, or you're in the spotlight. But do you think, as your role as a sports psychologist, to get the most out of the work and get the most out of the players, you have to be just fully devoted to the players' own well-being and their own wellness? And do you think a way that you have to do that is by staying out of the spotlight?
Well, I think, see, the interesting thing about formulas, or the interesting thing about what I'm doing, and people will say, what's the formula? And I say, the formula is there's no formula. You got to go by what's required, what's here and what's required and what makes sense, what works, what doesn't work. So it's not like saying, okay, being in the shadows or being up front. It's not so much that. It's about, like, say, when I say this to people I work with, yeah, the organization, yes, I'm working for the organization, but the person's well-being is always going to take precedent. And so if you're not in alignment with my values, then I'm probably not going to be a good fit. But at the same time, it's not either or, it's yes and. Yes, we have to develop the me, but the we takes precedent over the we, and it doesn't have to be a situation where the we is going to grow if we decimate the me or we mistreat the me. I would say if you mistreat the me you decimate the me, you're going to have a weaker we. And so you can do both. You both can grow, but as you can see in the game, um, some people choose to take the money and go somewhere else, and some people, or the organization might say to not resign somebody because of the money, or not resign them because it's not a fit, and go with somebody else. It's a business at the same time, but at the same time, how you treat each other is really freaking important. And so this idea of me, it's not about me. I'm fine not being in the limelight, and I'm fine being in the limelight if that's what my job requires me to do. And so it's like the personality has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the function of the job, what the job requires. And it's this passion. I've worked on a lot of teams where in the background you don't even know I'm there. And this past year I worked with the Edmonton Oilers, and one of the things that happened is when we won the Western Conference Finals, I went on the ice to congratulate the guys with some of the other support staff. And so then people saw me, and they got mics now that they could see what you're saying. So one of my guys, I said, man, I said something personal to them, and they could hear it. So obviously you got to be on, your language has to be good, which mine's happen to be. But, but we were very conscious working with, Jeff Skinner, myself, Jeff, Jackson, and I was talking about Skinner, the goalie, um, that my first time working with Edmonton, they wanted to interview me, but I didn't really give a personal interview until February in Boston, where I live. And it was after the first quarter, they interviewed me, and people started to get to know who I was. But we've always kept it where the players always first. And my thing is, I'll do whatever they ask me to do. If they want me to be up front and talk, I will. If they don't, I don't have to. See, the challenge, the interesting thing about my experience is when I work with people, I work with the elite of the elite. I've been involved, I think I'm trying to think. I don't know if it was my ninth or 10th finals, 8 NBA championships. I've been engaged in teams that won 8 NBA championships. And so and I worked with Michael Kobe now, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Shaquille O'Neal, a lot of people I've worked over in England with Chelsea and all this. So I've worked with the elite. It's not about that. I don't have to work with you so you can say, oh, yeah, I work. It's not about that. But I think all of that stuff is happening because I was following my bliss, and doors open where there were no doors. But I've been lucky. Now, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So I've been working my ass off and outworking people and whatnot, but not in order to get something. I was working my ass off and doing what I'm supposed to do because I want to be the best at what I do. But I have to be the best version of myself. So I'm always pushing myself to get a little bit better each day. And so some people would be thinking I'm retired. I'm pretty sure a lot of people were surprised that I was still out kicking and doing this thing all these years later. Because you got to understand, when I was rooming with Dr. J, I was in 70s. When I was working with the Bulls, that's the 90s. I'm working with Kobe, and the Lakers, that's 2000. Even you go to 2010 or even more. And then now I'm working with other teams and other players I work with is 2020, 24. So you think about
And you don't look
all
a
of
day
those
over 50.
decades. You're going from the 70s to almost to 30, to 2030. And the thing is, I feel like I got better. I'm keeping getting better, and I'm not done yet. And so it's not about. It's about just what I'm being the model. I'm modeling what I'm saying. It's like, you just keep getting better. You keep evolving, and you keep being a service. But it's because I want to be a service. I don't need it. I can say, oh, I had enough. I don't have to do anything. It's not about that. It's about me doing what I love to do and being a service. As long as I think I can help somebody, I'm going to keep doing this. The day I don't think I can be helpful, I won't do it.
Yeah, you clearly have deep roots, and like I've said multiple times throughout our conversation, I feel like that is because it would have to stem from your own personal experiences and how you've
Hmm.
used all the stuff you've learned and applied it into your own life first, and now you're teaching it with everyone else. And one of the main reasons that you started with the Bulls, or why Phil Jackson wanted you to join the organization, is because when Michael Jordan left to play baseball, he wanted somebody to help with the team and, like you said, deal with that transition period. But then obviously Michael Jordan comes back and you start working with him as well. How did him coming back to the Bulls impact you and your work?
It was, I mean, it was, I mean, he's very coachable, very humble, very hungry. It was like we didn't miss a beat. We didn't miss a beat because he could see the value of it and he could see how much it's helping the team. And, just like with Kobe, we just set it off because, we want the same thing. We're pursuing excellence and wisdom. And and of course, once again, I got street credit because of Dr. J and all the people I work with. Then now Michael, then Kobe, then whether I work with Mello or now I'm working with Shauna. I mean, now I'm working with Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl or the whole team, Zach Hyman, whoever, Skinner. I mean, I can name a bunch of them, um, but it's not that. It's more about authenticity. I believe is really more authenticity than achievement. But if you're authentic, you probably have a better chance of achieving your goals than if you don't. And so, yeah, it's like I had no idea that was going to happen. I mean, I'm sitting, not quite a year ago, but let's say last August, I'm sitting minding my business, doing what I need to do, and I get a message on LinkedIn from this gentleman, Jeff Jackson, says, "Hey, can we talk? I'm the CEO of the Edmonton Oilers, and I'd like you to I'd like to talk to you about coming and help us win a Stanley Cup." Like I said, doors open where there were no doors. There's something about when you do what you're supposed to do, and you're not through until you're through. As Yogi would say, it ain't over until it's over. Yogi Berra, that is.
Yeah.
So that's it. So I have no idea what's going to happen moment to moment. And guess what? You don't either. No one knows what's going to happen in the next unfolding moment. But what we do know is you get to choose how you respond to it or react to it.
And it's
You
about
get to choose to
leading.
figure out what you need to be. But without that sense of urgency, without the desire to succeed, without the want to, you're not going to get consistently uh, elite performance, an excellent performance. I would say pure performance. I would even say that because sometimes you do your best and you still ain't gonna win. It has nothing to do with it. You're still a winner if you can walk away and say, I did all I could do. I can't control the results, but I can control what I did, and I gave everything I had. I got better today.
You had an up close view, obviously, to Michael Jordan. What makes him so special?
It's probably a lot of things, but I'd say all you got to do is look at his reactions to life. Let's look at it that way. Okay, he's in the 10th grade in high school, and he gets cut from his basketball team. So by the time I met him, 1995, he acted like he was still trying to make the team. Do I have to say anything else? Something happens, he interprets it in ways that move, inspires him. And he said, "I ain't never getting cut again." Nothing personal. And then when the dude came to when he got inducted, he said, "Dude, you made a mistake." But that mistake probably made MJ who he is. You understand what I'm saying? And so what makes him great is his mental toughness, his ability to do things. I'll give you an example. When he came back in March, and I think they were on the East Coast. I think he played in Madison Square Garden, scored 45 points, whatever. I don't know if it was before or after. But anyway, came to Boston. When the team would come to Boston, I would work with them the day of the game. when the coaches will go off and we work with them, and I'm teaching them, showing them some moving stuff and whatnot, and he's got the stem thing on his finger because his finger was hurt. And I said, "Oh, MJ, you don't have to do this, and we're going to do some sun salutations or whatever, some stretching." And he said, "No, I'm going to do it. Do I need to say anything else?"
Just being the ultimate learner and just putting the ego aside. And
And he's going to do more than you ask him to do. It's just so the will to win is one thing, that the desire to succeed, but also being humble and hungry, because
how
there's a
long
lot of that there. That there's you got to want to. So everybody will say, "Yeah," but they don't have it like that.
how long into working with him did it feel like the a real personal relationship had been built?
From my end, I don't know. You have to ask him, but I think because I always use him as a role model. I mean, I named my company after him. I have the Hurricane because even before I knew him, I watched him play, and he seemed to get more calm as things got more chaotic, and the more pressure, the more calm he got. So um, you have to ask him, but it was like, you know, we speak the same language, you have the same values. Doesn't take long. And plus, seeing me working with other people and seeing that Phil trusts me and the other guys uh, felt good about me, and yeah, we just hit it off. And me being my situation with Dr. J. I mean, it's like that's quite a lineage. Dr. J, uh, MJ, Kobe Bryant, uh, Carmelo Anthony, uh, Connor McDavid, whatever, on and on and on.
Yeah, but like you were saying, which is so powerful and great to see, is that obviously those are all incredible athletes within the history of sports, elite names, but it's not just about helping the player, it's about helping the person. And
That's it.
it doesn't matter who that person is, whether they're at the top of their sport or if they're incarcerated and in prison. Like I know you've worked with a lot of prisoners as well. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
who it is.
yeah, like Shaq, see Shaq or Robert, or I mean, I can name 1,000 people. I mean, it's like you went through Steve Kerr. You go through the wars with him. It's about the relationship. Ships. That's how it grows. My relationship with Phil, my relationship with every single person. It's about the relationship. It's like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who they are. So it doesn't matter if you're MJ or your no name. It doesn't matter. I'm going to relate to you in the same way, with the same care and compassion and uh, wanting to help you be the best you can be. That's why it's not like everybody's going to be an MJ or a Kobe or whatever. Your job is to be the best version of yourself. My job is to help you unlock so you can express that and share it with the rest of us.
You've said that when you work with kids, you like to express your shy, vulnerable side and let that kid out and let him out to the surface. What type of person did you try to bring to the surface when you worked with the Bulls and the Lakers?
I wasn't thinking about it like that. See, that's the interesting thing. And when you said, I let this, I ain't letting nothing happen. It just happens. See what I'm saying? There's something about kids, that young people, because they're innocent, and what you see is what you get. You got to be real with them, man. Not that you're not real with other people, but they know it, man, and they're on a nonverbal level, so they're going to tell you how they feel. And there's just there's something about retaining your childlike qualities of living in the mystery, being excited about everything. And when they learn how to walk, when they fall down, they don't get up and frown. They just get up, they smile, and they keep going. And they can fall down maybe 100,000 times. Doesn't matter. They always try to get up. Now, if we try to learn how to walk now, we fall. We probably say, "Okay, I'm gonna give myself 5 times. After 5, I'm done." or somebody sees you fall, oh man, I'm not doing this when anybody's looking, that sort of thing. Because the ego gets in, and back then they see the world and everything is being connected, and it's just something innocent about them not being jaundiced or being programmed by the culture or by the people they've been hanging around with or the role models they've been learning from.
Couldn't agree with you more. When you're a kid and you experience failure, it only motivates you more because you have that pure childlike energy to you. But like you were saying, the ego gets built up in your head when you're an adult, and it forces you to see failure in a much different way. When you started working with the Lakers, you initially said that Kobe was the closest thing that you saw to Michael Jordan, but
Mm-hmm.
then you realized that he was his own person and his own player. What made him a one of one?
Everybody knows it as a mama mentality. It's there's a hunger and a thirst for knowledge, but it's that killer instinct, and it's also this unshakable belief and that sort of thing. So sometimes the stories are it's really helpful. So I kept seeing him being the closest thing to MJ, and I worked with both of them very closely, intimately, and won championships with both of them, or they won championships with me. Without my maybe they could do it without my support, but I was lucky enough to be in there and be part of the process. Um, but I think for him is his desire to succeed and his willingness, his hungry, being hungry and humble, and working more than anybody talk about outwork. I mean, when I first met, I remember I heard about uh, him before we got there in LA. I think he shot a couple of air balls, and so when he goes back home to where he was living in Newport Beach, he called the custodian, had the custodian open up the gym, and he shot for 8 hours. Now, first of all, it's amazing. How the hell does he have the custodian's number? Think about that, you know. But that's Kobe. But that was Kobe, man. That was him. I mean, he would do things like that. You get what I'm saying? And I remember when in 2015 he called me up and had me come out and hang out with him for a little bit, and so I'm thinking I'm just going to stay in Newport Beach. I wasn't going to go to the United Center, well, the Staples Center, which is now, I think it's cryptos.com. I forget what they call it now, but they still call it the Staples Center. So Staples still getting their money. Uh, but but I remember talking to him, and there's a few times that I could talk to him, and it was just us and not security or other team members or whatnot. And I remember he said, "Hey, I want you to go to the game with me tonight." And I said, "Okay, I'll go." I didn't have a suit or anything, but there's a picture of he and I walking through there. That's the only picture I have working with these guys because it's very private. Um, and he says, "Well, limo will come over and get you at such and such a time." I said, "Limo? What do you mean?" He says, "Yeah, the limo will take you to the airport, and then we'll take the helicopter." And I said, "Man, how long you been taking the helicopter?" And then he told me. I said, "I just never knew that." But he was doing things that nobody else would do. Or what you doing this summer? Oh, I'm working on my 3-point shot. It's 1,300 made threes every day. That's a mama mentality, but it's always been there. But then he started sharing it with people. And then when he hurt his finger and he couldn't hold the ball and he didn't miss a game and he changed his shot in mid-season, nobody does that. And that's when I said, no, he's his own person. I can't, I'm not going to keep comparing him to MJ. And of course, he's been being mentored by MJ, and he said it in public that what you see in me, I got from him. So you can't compare us.
With MJ and Kobe, Did you ever get the impression like they were trying to compete with other people, or was it just the ultimate competition of competing with themselves?
Well, Michael would compete with anybody, anytime. I think it's not either or. I think it was both. I think by competing with other people, that they wanted to push themselves out of their comfort zone. And if you're not out of your comfort zone, you're not learning. And you can see when MJ retired is because he didn't have the motivation to be the best. Besides, grieving his dad, but that was ultimately what it was. Is that you have to have that itch, you have to have that desire, that will to win, that desire to succeed, because it's a tremendous amount of effort and discomfort you have to go through. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you have to tolerate a lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of unpleasantness. It's part of the process.
It's one thing to coach someone and give them the tools to succeed, but hearing you talk, I feel like it's not just about the teaching, but it's also about the teacher and that transfer of energy.
Hmm.
Why do you think you were able to connect so deeply with two of the best athletes in the history of sports?
I think it has a lot to do with, see, the way I operate, the way I think about it is, when I'm working with somebody, I'm not working with their personality. I'm working with their divinity, the divine spark, their masterpiece within. So I'm relating to the masterpiece, and part of my job is to hold the space so that people can grow into it. But it's not what I think is who they are. That makes sense. And of course, I'm coming up with reasons, but I don't know. I mean, it's like sometimes we have this ability, or we have this tendency to say this is the reason, this is what's happening, whatever. But there's so many different things that go with it. The context, the level of consciousness, the readiness of it's like you send a message. The message will be received clearly if the receiver is working properly, and receiver is open and willing to let the radio waves in, or whatever it is, the vibration, the energy in. So there's so many different things, and then timing is everything. It's your state of mind. It's like you catch me on a funky day, it would be different than catching me on a day where I'm feeling like all's right with the world. You understand what I'm saying? And so there's a lot of different things, but that's something I'll probably contemplate and think about, because sometimes it's not like, how do I want to say this? When you're in flow, when you're just in the moment, there's a wisdom and creativity can express itself if you can get out of the way, that goes beyond all human research, or like Joseph Campbell would say, it's going beyond all human research, or the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. It's still a mystery, and it's powerful and it's amazing, but it's not something that you can kind of just describe with words. If that makes any sense, but you can see it. It's just like we don't see electricity, but we can see the impact it has.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
We don't
sense.
even know what electricity is. We can kind of talk about it, but we know how to make it work and to see it. It's the same with chemistry. I hear coaches say, "Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I know what it looks like when you have it." And some other things is, we don't know what it is, but we know what it looks like when it's not there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what I would probably say is when you have that transfer of energy, it
Yeah,
can't always be put into words, but it's more so can only be
yeah,
seen and
but
can
it's
only be
but it's a
felt.
dance. It's not just one side. It's a dance.
Yeah, it's the relationship between the two
Right.
people. What does the future of your hero's journey look like?
What does it look like? It looks like now.
I like that answer.
This is it. It's like this moment. This is what it looks like. Yeah. But to me, what I hope it looks like is, we can just be in the moment and be in joy and support each other to be the best version of ourselves. That's what it's about. It's like how do we create space, or as they like to say, Martin Buber had this idea in this book he called the book called The Way of Man, the Hasidic way, or I forget the exact title, but The Way of Man, the Hasidic teachings or something like that. And he said that as human beings, we could do something that angels can't do. You know what that is? Whatever we can make things holy by a holy intent. You can hallow something, you can make it holy by letting God in or letting that energy, that love in wherever we can. We can do that through intention. That's what we can do that the angels can't do.
George, I appreciate you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you for your questions and your interest and your inviting me. So thanks, Tim.
The pleasure is all mine. Where can people go to support you and your work?
Yes, so you can always go to my website, georgemumford.com. But and go to the website, and there's all sorts of things there. And it just so happens we just released my 200th episode of At Home with George. That's on the YouTube channel. And of course, they can go to Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or whatever. And my two books, The Mindful Athlete, Secrets to Pure Performance, which came out in 2015. And the one that just came out last year, Unlocked, Embrace Your Greatness, Find the Flow, Discover Success. And of course, if they were to Google me, there'd be all kinds of stuff that comes up. But the main thing is my website, and I hope people can go and check it out. And I think there's probably some free stuff on there people can download or whatever. But yeah, so that's it.
Awesome, George. Appreciate
That's
it.
it. Yeah, appreciate you, man.